Welcome to a special video we have for you today. We are excited to bring you a unique collection of 5 memorable stories from our loyal fans. These are favorite episodes about places no one dares to go, and people who dare to push the limits to explore the mysteries. What's more, the entire content has been completely remade, from the images, sounds, to the storytelling. So even if you have seen these stories before, this time it will bring you a completely new experience, full of excitement and drama. Before we begin, if you love mysterious, strange, and dark stories, you have come to the right place, because that is exactly what our channel is all about. We update videos every week with unique and engaging content. So please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to turn on all notifications so you don't miss any future content. Thanks for joining us. Now, let's get into today's 5 mystery stories. Sevnica is a beautiful town in the heart of Slovenia, boasting a picturesque setting thanks to the Sava River, one of the longest rivers in Europe, flowing through it. The section of the Sava that runs through the town used to be a popular destination for water sports enthusiasts, such as kayaking and canoeing. However, in 2008, a hydroelectric dam was built here, which changed all that. Not only did the dam block the river's natural flow, but it also created an unwanted stop for those who wanted to continue their journey on the water, forcing them to stop, walk around the dam, or end their trip there. While the dam was still under construction, the mayor of Sevnica expressed strong support for the project, believing that the dam would bring much-needed electricity to the town. However, he also understood that this would mark the end of a memorable period in local history, a time when the Sava River was a symbol of freedom and adventure. In the spirit of honoring the past and preserving the river's fond memories, the mayor decided to organize a special trip that he called The Last Descent. He asked the people of Sevnica to join him on his last adventure on this stretch of river, while it was still intact. After a series of invitations, he finally convinced 27 people to join him. On July 3, with all preparations complete, the group of 28 people, including the mayor, headed upstream to the departure point. There, 4 boats were prepared for the journey. A staff team also provided the group with life jackets, but most of the group, for unknown reasons, refused to wear them. Perhaps they felt the river was too calm to worry about safety. The group divided into 7 people per boat, pushed off the bank, and began their slow journey down the river. The mayor, wishing to preserve this memorable moment, hired a photographer to accompany them to record the entire trip. The photos and stories from The Last Descent have become an important part of Sevnica's history, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter for the town on the Sava. As the boatmen continued to slowly move on the water, everything seemed wonderful at first. The photographer was diligently taking beautiful photos, while the warm weather and calm river seemed to support this special journey. However, about 15-20 minutes into the journey, as the boat crew turned a corner, they suddenly saw the dam about 1,000 feet ahead. Although the dam was not yet complete, the main structure had been built, and from a distance, they could clearly see the large concrete arches where water was pouring over the banks. It quickly became clear to the group that they were facing a serious problem. According to the mayor's original plan, the dam would not completely block the river at this point. The construction team had previously confirmed that there was an unblocked passageway on the left side of the dam, allowing boats to pass safely. But now, from their current position, it was clear that there was no passageway to bypass the dam. The river was moving very slowly, with almost no significant current, so no one felt the need to make an immediate decision. The group's intuition told them that the safest option was to land, get out of the boat, and walk around the dam, or simply end the journey there. But the mayor had other ideas. With a glint of excitement in his eyes, he suggested, "Why don't we try to cross this dam?" Although the construction crew had clearly warned that it was extremely dangerous and completely off limits, the mayor made the idea sound like an exciting adventure. He pointed to the dam, not a giant dam with a sheer cliff, but a much lower structure, with a gently sloping embankment, about 10–15 feet high and about 100 feet long. The water poured down in a gentle stream, and below the embankment, the water was rough but not scary. From a distance, the dam looked like a giant slide. With an optimistic smile, the mayor told the group, "Just think how exciting it would be to be the first, and perhaps the last, people to slide across this dam. It would be an unforgettable adventure." His persuasive words made some of the group waver. Some were excited by the idea, drawn by the sense of adventure, but others were skeptical, trying to remind them of the warnings from the construction team and the possible risks. However, the mayor's enthusiasm seemed overwhelming. He stood up on the boat, spread his arms out as if to show that there was nothing to worry about, and said, "We're not just sailing, we're making history." This statement seemed to ignite the group's adventurous spirit. Should they play it safe or embark on a unique experience? They knew they were at a crucial moment. Soon, 3 of the 4 boats were ready to carry out their daring plan, to cross the dam. The 4th boat, however, was not involved in this plan. There was a photographer in the boat, and the group decided, "We don't feel safe crossing the dam, but we'll pull it to shore to capture the moment you do it." The photographer, with his camera ready, excitedly said, "This will be the best shot." After agreeing on each person's role, the 4 boats began to drift downstream. About 200 feet from the entrance to the dam, the 4th boat slowly turned onto the left bank of the river, where the photographer was ready to record everything. He stepped out, set up his camera, and began focusing his lens on the remaining 3 boats as they made their way toward the giant dam. In the video that was later released, you can clearly see the image of the first boat. The 7 people on the boat were all beaming, their eyes filled with excitement and a hint of nervousness, as if they were waiting for a roller coaster ride. Smiles and laughter echoed across the river, creating a dramatic moment. They gradually approached the entrance of the dam, where the dim light from outside was replaced by pitch-black darkness. The boat passed through the dam gate, then began to slide down the steep embankment. In the video, you see the stern of the boat suddenly lift up, indicating that they had entered the most dangerous part. A scream was heard from one of the people on the boat, and then everything fell into complete silence. The last image in the video is the stern of the boat disappearing into the darkness. At the bottom of the dam, the boat capsized as soon as it hit the water, throwing all 7 people into the raging current. They had no chance to breathe or find a way to escape. The powerful currents below the dam immediately swept them deeper, not only because of the turbulence of the currents, but also because of the way the dam worked. Beneath the surface, there were large holes that led to a system of tunnels under the dam. These tunnels acted like giant vacuum cleaners, pulling all the water and anything else that got caught in them down into them. The water was pushed through powerful turbines where it spun to generate electricity. The water was then released at a point further away from the site of the accident. For the 7 people in the boat, what had been an exciting adventure turned into tragedy in the blink of an eye, leaving an unforgettable sense of horror for those watching and those left on shore. Although the dam was not yet fully operational, The tunnels and turbines at the bottom had already begun operating. The powerful currents that swept through these tunnels acted like giant vacuum cleaners, creating an extremely dangerous water zone at the base of the dam. As the first boat plunged and capsized, all 7 people on board were caught in the violent whirlpool and sucked down into the irresistible tunnels. The remaining 2 boats, unaware of the tragic fate of their predecessors, continued on toward the dam. The second boat, as it plunged down the slope, met a similar fate. It capsized at the foot of the dam, and all 7 people on board were thrown into the water. Almost immediately, they were sucked into the vortex, lost in the cold darkness of the underwater tunnels. The third boat was luckier, not capsuling as it slid down the slope. After passing the dam and moving further, the group began to look around for the other 2 boats. They thought that surely they had passed and were ahead. But when they looked back, there was no sign of their comrades. Worrying, the third boat decided to turn back, hoping that the others might still be near the foot of the dam. But when they arrived, the sight before them was shocking. One of the boats had completely capsized. The other was a mass of drifting wood in the swirling water. Panic and helplessness overwhelmed them. They tried to row their boats toward the foot of the dam to save anyone they could. But by the time they got there, it was too late. There was no one left on the water. All 14 people in the other 2 boats had disappeared. In the end, tragedy claimed the lives of 13 of the 14 who fell into the water. One of the victims was the mayor, a respected figure in the community. The only miracle that happened that day was that his wife, the sole survivor, somehow escaped the swirling water and tunnels at the bottom of the dam. She swam to shore, exhausted and completely broken. In the following days and weeks, police divers searched. After much effort, the bodies of all 13 victims were eventually recovered, including one who had been swept 25 miles away, all the way to Croatia. Although the bodies were recovered, no official information has been released about the condition in which they were found. The biggest question remains whether the tunnels that carry water through the turbines under the dam directly caused their deaths. The only thing that is known is that most, if not all, of the unfortunate people were sucked down into the deadly tunnels, where their lives ended in darkness and chaos. In the early 1980s, John Harder was a standout kid in high school in Delaware, Ohio, a small town near the state capital. John was not like the typical athlete in high school movies, not pushy, not cocky, and certainly not stupid. Instead, he was known as friendly, warm, and approachable. John had a great sense of humor. He often played harmless pranks to make people around him laugh. One of his most memorable moments was when he enthusiastically joined the cheerleading squad at a school rally, even though he was not actually a cheerleader. All of this made John a beloved friend and a popular figure. John's plan after graduating on June 5, 1983, was to study accounting at Kent State University. But before they left school, there was one event he and his friends were looking forward to: graduation night at Kings Island Amusement Park. It was a large park with dozens of roller coasters, water slides, and other attractions, about a 2-hour drive west of the school. On that night, the park would be closed to the public and open only to students from nearby high schools. John, then 17, couldn't contain his excitement. He quickly bought tickets, along with about 20 other friends. On Friday afternoon, May 13, the group gathered outside the school, ready to go. Although it was a school-sponsored trip, each student provided their own transportation. Once everyone was ready, they piled into the car and set off. On the way to the park, the group stopped several times to eat and rest. But John, in the excitement and recklessness of youth, drank half a bottle of rum and a few beers while sitting in the passenger seat. By the time he reached the park at 7 p.m., he was so drunk he could barely stand. When the group of students from Delaware High School arrived at the park gates, they showed their tickets to the attendant and were allowed inside. Even though it was a special event for ticket holders only, the park was crowded, with hundreds of students from other schools also attending. After entering the park, John's group quickly split into smaller groups and went their separate ways. John's group included his girlfriend, Pam. However, instead of enjoying the lively atmosphere, John and Pam spent most of the first hour arguing. John, who was now drunk, looked very emotional and sad. At around 8:30 p.m., John's group decided to line up for the roller coaster. While waiting, John suddenly declared, "I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to go home." John's voice was filled with frustration, and it seemed like he was intentionally trying to make Pam feel worse. A few of his friends tried to lighten the mood. "Hey, calm down, man. Just enjoy this ride, and then we'll go get something to eat. It'll be fine." However, John seemed unable to control his emotions. Regardless, the group boarded the roller coaster around 9 p.m. After the ride ended, they got off the ride and walked away from the area, ready to discuss what to do next. But when they looked around, they realized that John had disappeared. At first, the group thought that John just wanted to leave for a while to calm down. They decided to continue participating in other games in the park, hoping to see John again somewhere during the night. However, as the night wore on, they began to forget about John's absence. By the end of the night, the park's loudspeakers announced, "We are closing the park now." The group realized that John had not returned. The park still allowed the public to use a stairwell to reach the lowest observation deck at 50 feet. From there, the next path to the observation deck at 275 feet was protected by a 6-foot fence that only authorized personnel could pass. The fence was intended to prevent anyone not on duty from climbing the higher parts of the tower. After exiting the roller coaster, John, perhaps out of curiosity or some other personal impulse, left the group without notice. He headed straight for the base of the Eiffel Tower replica, avoiding the official elevators and opting to take the stairs. At the 50-foot observation deck, John came face to face with a security fence, but instead of stopping, he decided to climb over it. This action took him into an area not open to the public, with no security or supervision. John continued to climb the stairs, passing the permitted height. Approaching 275 feet, he stopped at an area with no safety platform, only steel beams supporting the tower structure. In a state of mental confusion, John climbed out of the stairs, climbed onto one of the beams, and began moving toward the center of the tower, where there were 3 elevator shafts. With no safety net, no safety rope, and only narrow metal bars to hold on to, John ventured deep into an extremely dangerous area. One misstep or one wrong move could have resulted in him falling hundreds of feet. Ultimately, the tragic accident occurred. According to the police's conjecture, John may have lost his balance or stepped into one of the elevator shafts, leading to his fatal fall. The incident was only discovered the next morning when park staff inspected the tower. John's body was found in an elevator shaft, prompting a lengthy investigation. The event was not only a huge shock to John's family and friends, but also sparked debate about amusement park safety measures. The park immediately closed the stairwell and increased surveillance measures, but for John's family and friends, it was an irreparable loss, unforeseen, and not part of normal safety measures. According to the theory put forward by the police after the investigation, John climbed over the stairwell railing, standing on a narrow beam only a few inches wide, without any protection. The fact that he was holding onto the beams above only added to the danger, as these were slippery and not designed to support weight or provide a grip. John may have lost his balance while trying to walk along the beam, or perhaps due to some misstep, he slipped and fell. Since the beams were in the open space of the tower structure, with no railings or nets to protect them, John's fall was inevitable. He plummeted to the ground from an incredible height, resulting in his instant death. The incident was only discovered when staff inspected the tower the following morning. John's body was found at the base of the tower, directly below the elevator shaft. This caused great shock to friends, family, and the community. Following the incident, the park immediately implemented strict safety measures. The stairs leading to the observation decks were completely closed, leaving the elevators as the only means of access to the observation decks. The park also increased surveillance, installed security cameras, and added warning signs in all dangerous areas. However, for John's family, these safety measures came too late. This incident is not only a personal tragedy, but also a reminder of the importance of maintaining and implementing safety measures in public places, especially in high-rise buildings or entertainment areas with complex structures like this simulation tower. John Harder, a tourist, decided to climb into the dangerous area inside an amusement park where an elevator was operating. He climbed over the beams and stood on the edge of the elevator shaft, admiring the view around him. However, as the elevator below began to move down, the counterweight of the elevator, located directly above him, hit John, pulling him off the beam. The impact caused John to be caught in the metal wire of the counterweight. An elevator operator, unaware of John's entrapment, adjusted the elevator to check and accidentally moved the counterweight, causing John to be hit hard and fall 200 feet, killing him instantly. Because he had no identification, police were unable to immediately identify John. That evening, his friends, worried that John had not returned, alerted the park security. They were eventually informed of the accident, and the body was identified at the hospital. John's motive for entering the restricted area remains a mystery. Some believe it was due to drunkenness. Others believe it was an unfortunate stunt, but no one can say for sure what motivated his actions. Antonio Navarrete is living the happiest days of his life. In the spring of 2017, everything seemed to be going perfectly for him. Just a year ago, Antonio, a 21-year-old Florida native, met the woman of his dreams, Daisy Martinez. Their fateful encounter quickly led to a beautiful relationship, and now Daisy is pregnant with their first child. They are full of hope about starting a happy family. Antonio and Daisy live with his parents in Wama, a quiet suburb south of Tampa. This is where Antonio grew up, where he feels safe and secure to welcome big changes in his life. Although still young, Antonio has a clear vision for his future. He wants to be an auto mechanic, a passion that has been rooted in him since he was a boy. Antonio's childhood memories include tinkering with toy cars, taking them apart, and putting them back together with incredible skill. As he grew older, Antonio began drawing intricate car designs, imagining the unique car designs he dreamed of one day making. Then, in his teenage years, his passion was realized when he started tinkering with real cars. Antonio's greatest pride at the time was his low-slung white Chevy truck, which he named Casper. Antonio customized the car himself with unique lights, special rims, and a huge sound system mounted behind the seats. Casper was more than just his means of transportation. It was his work of art, an integral part of his life. It was through Casper that Antonio met Daisy. One evening, he drove Casper to a local car meet where car enthusiasts came to display and admire their innovative innovations. There, Antonio saw Daisy, a beautiful young woman who stood out in the crowd. His eyes were drawn to her, and when she looked up and smiled warmly, Antonio knew his life had changed forever. 6 months later, Daisy moved in with Antonio, and they announced the happy news of their upcoming baby, bringing joy to the entire family. Not long after, Antonio received more good news. He was hired at Tampa Electric Company's Big Bend power plant, where he did equipment maintenance. The plant was located in Apollo Beach, about 10 miles from his home. The job not only provided financial security for his small family, but also allowed him to work in a challenging environment where he could pursue his passion for mechanics. In those days, Antonio felt that everything was going right. He had Daisy, a baby on the way, a loving family, and a promising future. But life, with all its unexpected twists and turns, sometimes brings challenges that no one can predict. Little did Antonio know that the events ahead would test his will, his love, and his ability to overcome adversity to the very end. Antonio never imagined that he would one day work in a power plant, especially one as huge as Big Bend. But life doesn't always go according to plan. With $12 an hour, nearly double what he had ever made, he and Daisy finally had the chance to build a life of their own, preparing for the arrival of their first child. That morning, Antonio drove his old truck to the plant, filled with hope and anxiety. A picture of Daisy, the woman he loved most, was taped to the dashboard as a source of encouragement. When he arrived, he was amazed by the size of the plant. 4 giant chimneys spewing white smoke create a majestic industrial scene right next to the water. The Big Bend power plant is a complex that generates electricity by burning coal. This process takes place in 4 separate units, each with a giant boiler as tall as a 12-story building. Coal is burned at the bottom of the boiler, creating steam to turn giant turbines, which, in turn, generate electricity. Excess steam then escapes through the chimneys, carrying with it ash, a natural byproduct of burning coal. In the 3 older units built in the 1970s, the ash is not captured, but instead melted under extremely high temperatures, turning into slag, a substance similar to molten lava. This red-hot slag flows through a hole in the bottom of the boiler and falls into a 30-foot-high cooling pool. There, cooling water turns the molten slag into hard glass fragments, which settle to the bottom of the pool. A crushing mechanism will further process, turning large slag pieces into small particles for reuse. Although this job was not Antonio's dream, he felt proud. This was not only an opportunity to earn money, but also the first step to building a future for his family. In a small golf cart, he spent the first day learning about the working environment, from the noise of the boilers to the slag recycling process. Part of him was excited that this could be the beginning of a new chapter in his life. At 4 p.m., after being informed of 2 serious problems in the Unit 2 boiler, a senior manager gathered 6 employees, including Antonio. They were tasked with fixing the problem without shutting down the boiler to save the plant money. This decision, though carefully considered, put the team in an unforeseen danger. Antonio's team was instructed to use manual tools to try to break up the slag that had built up inside the boiler and unblock the grinding mechanism in the water chamber. While the veteran employees seemed to be used to the pressure, Antonio, who had been working here for less than a week, felt nervous. He kept wondering whether he had the skills to face such a big challenge. Before starting work, Antonio thought about Daisy and her unborn child. The happy images of the family acted as a strong source of motivation, helping him overcome his anxiety. He told himself that he had to complete this task and return safely to witness the special moment in their lives. Once inside the boiler area, the team was faced with extremely high temperatures and deafening noises from the non-stop operating machines. Antonio was assigned to check the condition of the slag discharge hole. He carefully approached it, using the tools provided to try to break the accumulated slag. Suddenly, a loud hissing sound came from the boiler, startling everyone on the team. A large amount of molten ash and slag began to leak through the small hole. Antonio and his colleagues rushed back, trying to get the situation under control. In the chaos, a large piece of molten slag suddenly fell, causing a small explosion inside the boiler. Antonio, who was standing near the accident site, lost his balance and fell. His colleagues tried to pull him out, but the high temperature and dangerous conditions made rescue extremely difficult. Outside, the emergency alarm system sounded throughout the plant. Internal rescue personnel were quickly deployed, but Antonio's condition became critical. A medical team was called to the scene to take him to the nearest hospital. When the doghouse door opened, a strong stream of hot steam rose from the cooling chamber, carrying the remaining steam with it and causing the team to reflexively step back. Antonio, standing about 10 to 15 feet away, felt the sudden change in temperature and air pressure, making him immediately realize the terrible power of the giant machinery system in front of him. Inside the doghouse door, the grinding mechanism was clogged with large cinder blocks, now visible in the dim light from the industrial flashlight. The cinder blocks glowed red like lava, stacked on top of each other, blocking the entire grinding mechanism from working. The heat from the cooling chamber, combined with the burning coal above, created a feeling of suffocation and pressure. One of the repair team members, John, grabbed a hose and began to spray water forcefully into the clogged area. The water hit the cinder blocks with a loud hissing sound, and the steam rose thickly, obscuring the vision of everyone around. Antonio stood far away, not directly participating, but could not help but watch his teammates' every move. The senior manager, standing nearby, signaled the team to hurry up. "Hurry! We can't keep the boiler running like this for much longer," he shouted over the roar of the machinery. Antonio could feel the tension in the air. However, as the water seemed to be dissolving some of the slag, suddenly a loud explosion rang out from inside the grinding chamber. A shock wave shook the entire area. Antonio and the others immediately fell over or tried to hold on to the surrounding surfaces to keep their balance. Steam and debris shot out from the doghouse door, forcing everyone to back away. Antonio, though not directly involved, ducked down and covered his face with his hands, feeling the almost scorching heat. "Watch out! Stop!" someone shouted over the chaos. Antonio quickly looked around to make sure no one was seriously injured, but the sight of thick smoke and dust made it impossible to determine the condition of his teammates. The manager shouted loudly, ordering the entire team to evacuate the area immediately. In that moment, Antonio realized that these seemingly normal jobs were not as safe as they thought. This was not just repairing machinery. This was dealing with a giant, unpredictable, and extremely dangerous machine. The tragic story of Antonio and his teammates is a heartbreaking testament to the potential dangers of working in heavy industrial plants, where accidents can happen suddenly and with catastrophic consequences. When the employees performed their duties, none of them expected the end to come so suddenly and horribly. As the molten slag built up inside the boiler, to the point where it could no longer be sustained, the entire pressure was released in a matter of seconds. The stopper suddenly collapsed, opening a path for thousands of gallons of red-hot lava to erupt into the empty water chamber, creating a fierce wave that shot out of the dog cage door. In an instant, the entire area was engulfed in a sea of hot fire. Antonio, along with 5 other co-workers, had no time to react. The hot slag poured over their bodies, vaporizing their skin and flesh, slowly corroding them to the bone. All attempts to escape were futile, as their feet were stuck in the molten slag that covered the ground like a deadly carpet. The heat and pressure thickened the air around them, and screams of terror mixed with the hissing sounds of steam and the splashing of slag. Antonio, in his last moments, tried to do the only thing he could: contact his mother. Even though he couldn't escape the sea of hot slag, he pulled his phone from his pocket and left a final message. "Mom, I'm on fire. Please call the police. Please!" His voice was filled with despair, mingling with the horror of the accident. The voice message became Antonio's painful farewell to his family. Meanwhile, 5 of the 6 men involved in the repair work did not survive. The disaster not only claimed their lives, but also left a deep scar on their families and the community. Tampa Electric, the company that operated the plant, faced serious legal and financial consequences. The families received compensation, but nothing could ease their pain. The incident became a bitter lesson in the need for strict safety measures and a reminder of the value of every life in a dangerous work environment. What many people don't know is that scuba diving is more than just putting on your gear and jumping into the water. Scuba tanks contain a mixture of gases like oxygen, helium, and nitrogen. When you breathe in compressed air from a scuba tank, the oxygen is used up immediately and doesn't stay in your body. However, inert gases like helium and nitrogen are absorbed into your bloodstream and remain there until you surface. This isn't dangerous if you understand how to remove these gases from your body. As you slowly rise, these gases escape, but this process takes time. If you rise too quickly, the inert gases inside don't have time to escape and will expand in your body, causing a phenomenon similar to shaking a can of soda. The results can be very painful and, in some cases, fatal. This condition is called decompression sickness, or more commonly known as the bends. Divers avoid this risk by making decompression stops. These are planned stops at a specific depth for a specific time to allow inert gases time to diffuse out of the body before the diver continues to ascend. The deeper the dive, the more decompression stops are required. For example, if you were to ascend from 2000 ft, it would take you more than 33 hours to do so safely. However, very few people descend to this depth, with the exception of saturation divers working in the oil and gas industry. Saturation divers, also known as SAT divers, work at depths of up to 2000 ft to perform underwater construction and demolition tasks. To save time and avoid the risks associated with continuous resurfacing, they use a special method. After each dive, the diver does not resurface immediately, but is kept at a pressure equivalent to the working depth. They live in a small pressure chamber on a ship or oil rig. This chamber is designed to maintain a high-pressure environment, allowing the diver's body to stabilize. There is a bed and a bathroom inside the chamber, but the space is very small and uncomfortable. Although this job is full of risks and pressures, saturation divers are responsible for ensuring the safety and efficiency of deep-sea mining operations. Saturation diving is one of the most dangerous and terrifying jobs in the world, but at the same time, it is a feat of science and technology. It begins with divers entering a small pressure chamber, which looks like a submarine. The door of the chamber is sealed, and the pressure inside is slowly increased to match the depth at which they will work on the ocean floor. In addition to the main pressure chamber, there is a device called a diving bell, which is connected directly to the side of the chamber. The diving bell is also compressed to match the pressure at the working depth. When it's time to work, divers put on special diving suits inside the pressure chamber. They climb straight into the diving bell through a connecting door. Once the diver is inside, the bell door is closed and sealed. Those on the surface will use a crane to lower the bell into the water, bringing it to working depth. When the pressure inside the bell and the outside water environment is equal, the diver can slide open the door at the bottom of the bell without worrying about water getting in. They climb out through this door to do their work. The working environment on the seabed is completely different. There is no sunlight below 700 feet, about 213 meters. Everything is in complete darkness. The water temperature is extremely cold, forcing divers to rely on diving suits that are heated through a pipe connected to the diving bell. However, if this system fails, they can fall into hypothermia in just a few minutes. Divers use flashlights for illumination, but the light is often diffused by the thick sediment in the water, like shining a flashlight into fog. This severely limits visibility, adding another challenge to the job. After completing the mission, the diver returns to the diving bell, closes the door, and uses a radio to communicate with the crew on the ship or rig. The diving bell is raised to the surface, reattached to the pressure chamber, and the divers leave the bell and rest inside the chamber. Inside the pressure chamber, there are bunk beds for them to sleep in, a small bathroom, and minimal space for their living needs. They will stay here for the duration of their shift, which can last for days or even weeks, to maintain their body's oxygen saturation. When the shift ends, usually after about a month, the divers must undergo a lengthy decompression period to gradually adjust their bodies to normal atmospheric pressure. This is an important procedure to avoid dangerous problems such as decompression sickness. Saturation diving is an extremely dangerous job. Divers face the risks of high pressure, dark and cold environments, and the potential for equipment failure. Despite great advances in technology, the job is not for the faint of heart. Saturation divers require not only skill, but also courage and resilience to overcome the darkness and isolation of the ocean floor. Since the transducer had become loose, an urgent decision was made to remove the device before lowering the bell into the water. After removing the transducer, the diving bell was lowered into the sea, and divers Richard Walker and Victor Gill, along with their equipment, were lowered to a depth of 485 feet. Once they reached their working depth, they began their planned work, taking turns out of the bell to work on the underwater structure. Time passed normally until about 2:45 a.m. When Richard was working outside the diving bell, suddenly he heard a noise behind him. Turning around, he saw that the diving bell had begun to tilt to one side. Immediately, he received a message over the radio in his helmet asking him to return to the bell immediately, as this movement could be a sign of a serious problem. Richard quickly turned around, closed the door behind him, and informed Victor that they had received instructions from the ship. They were informed that the main cable connecting the diving bell to the ship had come loose. However, in addition to the main cable, there was an umbilical cord, which served as a power supply, hot water, and communications. This cord was not designed to withstand heavy loads, but in an emergency, it had to shoulder the task of saving lives. But when this umbilical cord was not strong enough to keep the diving bell stable, the crew on board decided that the only way was to use the umbilical cord to pull the bell up. However, as the towing began, the umbilical cord broke, and the diving bell fell to the bottom of the ocean, leaving them with only hope that someone would come down to rescue them. Meanwhile, Richard and Victor were trapped inside the diving bell. With no communication, no light, and no heat source, they were left with only the last bit of oxygen to sustain their lives. With the space cramped and lacking, they were forced to patiently sit in the dark and hope that rescue would arrive in time. About 3 hours later, a rescue ship was finally able to send rescue divers down to find the diving bell. But with the transducer having been removed earlier, the search became more difficult than ever. After another hour of searching, rescue divers finally discovered the bell and proceeded to rescue Richard and Victor. They were brought to the surface exhausted, but fortunately survived. However, in this case, Richard and Victor's company decided not to use a weight and instead attached the weight directly to the diving bell, making it impossible for the bell to float when it fell to the bottom of the sea. This created an extremely dangerous situation as the diving bell was stuck on the ocean floor, and the escape hatch that the diver would use to get out was also pressed into the seafloor. Inside the bell, Richard and Victor were facing a desperate situation. With no radio contact, no light, and running out of oxygen, they were forced to sit in complete darkness, hoping that someone would come to their rescue in time. The only thing they could do was stay calm and wait for rescue, even though they knew time was running out. Fortunately, about 30 minutes after the diving bell fell, a diving rescue vessel was deployed to rescue them. However, because the transducer had been removed before Richard and Victor dived, finding the diving bell was very difficult. It took the rescue divers another hour to locate the bell. Finally, at around 7 am, they found the diving bell and immediately sent the rescue divers into the water. When the rescue divers approached the bell and shone a light inside, they saw Richard and Victor sitting inside the bell, exhausted and barely able to move. They were rescued and brought to the surface safely, but with fear and a sense of luck at having survived such a serious accident. After this incident, the company implemented strict safety measures, especially regarding the use of diving bells and rescue equipment, to avoid similar situations in the future. Richard and Victor not only survived, but also took with them a valuable lesson in the importance of following safety procedures when working in the deep sea. The story of Richard and Victor is truly a stressful and painful experience, especially in these crucial hours. When they initially raised their thumbs, everyone on the surface felt relieved and had hope that they would be rescued. However, when the rescue divers encountered difficulties in maintaining the stability of the diving bell, the situation quickly became dire. With oxygen depletion, the cold and despair in Richard and Victor's eyes were increasingly evident. They had no hope of being saved. Despite the rescue divers' best efforts to pull them up, the rope snapped just as they were about to reach their destination, letting everyone know that their chances of survival were almost gone. Even when the rescue divers found Richard and Victor again, the two no longer wanted to communicate, just sitting there, accepting their fate. In the following hours, despite further attempts to pull them up, their condition did not change. And finally, when the diving bell was raised and the hatch opened, Richard and Victor were no more, leaving behind a pain that could not be soothed. This story is a testament to the harshness of life and death situations and how people face death in silence and serenity when there is no hope. Friday night, January 12, 2007, at 7:20 p.m., Wade Steffi, a 19-year-old freshman at Purdue University, walked into Ford Dining Hall. It was one of 5 main dining halls on Purdue's campus, a prestigious Indiana school known for both its academic excellence and its athletic prowess. Wade was an aerospace engineering major who attended Purdue on a full scholarship due to his academic excellence. After picking up a few simple items from the self-serve menu, he found a seat at a table with a few close friends. It was the first Friday night of the spring semester of 2007, and the dining hall was filled with the chatter and laughter of hundreds of students. The tables were filled with eager faces chatting about their plans for the evening or the upcoming weekend. Wade and his group were no exception. They sat chatting animatedly, sharing their plans for fun, immersing themselves in the vibrant life of the campus. Time passed quickly, and when the clock struck around 8:20 p.m., Wade realized that it was time to leave. He stood up, politely said goodbye to his friends, and carried his tray of food to the cleaning area. Then, he left Ford Dining Hall, walked through the large doors, and quickly turned right, heading towards a nearby building. This building was Owen Hall, one of the dormitories on campus. However, this was not where Wade lived. He had a special reason to come here that night, and the short journey from Ford Dining Hall to Owen Hall marked an important turning point, leading to a remarkable event in his life. Although Wade Steffi lived in Cary Quad West Dormitory, not far from Ford Dining Hall, that night he decided to visit Owen Hall, where some of his friends lived. Upon entering Owen Hall, Wade quickly made his way to his group's room. Inside the small but cozy room, his friends were chatting animatedly and enjoying a few drinks together. Wade joined in the intimate atmosphere, raising his glasses and sharing stories. The group laughed, talked about plans, intentions, and everyday stories of college life. Time passed smoothly, and at around 9:30 p.m., Wade and his group of friends left Owen Hall for a large party at a fraternity house, half a mile west of campus. The fraternity house was filled with music and laughter. Wade mingled with the crowd, chatting with old friends and making new ones. It was a lively evening, but in the excitement, Wade suddenly remembered something important. He had left his jacket in Owen Hall. It was almost midnight. Deciding to go back to Owen Hall to get his jacket, Wade pulled a friend outside to share his intentions. Although Owen Hall was locked for the night, Wade believed he could contact someone inside to open the door. On his way back, he made a total of 6 calls. 4 of them were wrong numbers, leading to awkward conversations and ending with the recipient hanging up. The other 2 calls went to friends who lived in Owen Hall, but neither of them answered. At around 12:30 a.m., Wade arrived at the front door of Owen Hall. With his phone back in his pocket, he stood in front of the locked door, knocking, hoping that someone inside would hear. Finally, a resident of Owen Hall, who was completely unfamiliar with Wade, heard the knocking and came over to check. They looked through the glass door, seeing Wade standing there. The weight and the cold air of the late night, the dim light from the dormitory hallway shining through the glass, created a scene filled with tension, but also the mundaneness of college life. Wade Steffi's disappearance has caused great concern in the Purdue community. Shortly after he was reported missing, Wade's family and friends contacted his cell phone service provider to track the location of his phone. Results showed that Wade's phone signal was still on campus, but the exact location was not determined. That evening, a massive search operation was organized, involving hundreds of police officers, volunteers, and even the school's equestrian club. The equestrians scoured the nearby wooded areas, but all efforts were fruitless. The only thing that was found connected to Wade was one of his shoes. The shoe was discovered on January 24 days after Wade went missing. It was just outside a door leading to the maintenance room in Owen Hall. However, when they checked the room, Wade was not there. Despite a weeks-long search involving a large number of people, no further clues emerged. Finally, after nearly a month, the search was officially called off. 2 months later, on March 19, a maintenance worker was working in the basement of Owen Hall. In the laundry room, while checking the washers and dryers, the worker heard a strange bang. At first, he thought the noise was coming from one of the machines. However, after careful inspection, he realized that the sound was not coming from the laundry room, but from the hallway outside. Curious, the worker left the room and walked into the hallway. The bang rang out again, this time clearly coming from behind a door opposite the laundry room. He took out his key and opened the door. When he entered, the worker made a horrifying discovery: the body of Wade Steffi. He found Wade in a small maintenance room, a place not designed for students to enter. Based on the evidence and subsequent investigation, the story gradually became clear. On the night of January 13, after being unable to enter Owen Hall through the main door, Wade decided to find another way into the building. He walked around to the left and found a door. Although this door had no sign, it was clearly not for students. As Wade tried to open the door and enter, he didn't realize that he had entered a dangerous area, a maintenance room with electrical equipment. In the darkness and perhaps still under the influence of alcohol, Wade accidentally touched a transformer or electrical system in the room, resulting in a fatal electric shock. The wall was so narrow that he could barely squeeze through. Wade tried to squeeze through the narrow gap, but the absolute darkness and the noise of the machinery only made him more confused. At this point, Wade began to feel a little nervous, but he reassured himself that everything would be fine if he just found another way out. He groped his way forward, running his hands along the cold surface of the machinery to find his bearings. Suddenly, he noticed a narrow passage running along the right side of the machine, leading deeper into the room. With determination, he followed that passage, but after only a few steps, he felt the space becoming narrower and narrower, and the surrounding walls seemed to be closing in on him. The hum of the machinery grew louder, accompanied by the clanking of metal as if something was moving inside the structure. Wade stopped, feeling a cold breath from somewhere on his face. He looked around, but the darkness gave him no clues. Suddenly, he heard a new sound, a small noise, like footsteps. It echoed steadily, getting closer to him. Wade froze. All he could think about was turning back to the door he had left open. But just as he was about to turn around, he tripped over something under his feet and fell to the floor. The clanging of metal rang out deafeningly, further panicking him. As he tried to stand up, he realized that he had dropped his other shoe. At this moment, he had only one thought: he had to get out of here. Wade turned and ran for what he thought was the exit. But when he got there, he found that the shoe he had used to block the door had been moved. The door was now closed, and in the terrible silence, he heard the cold click of the lock. Wade's fingers slid deep into the narrow hole, and for a moment, he didn't realize what was happening. The cold, stinging sensation from his fingertips quickly turned into a powerful shock. The high-voltage current coursed through his body, tensing every muscle in an instant. His body felt locked up, uncontrollable. Wade's eyes rolled back, his mouth opened, but no scream came out. The excruciating pain enveloped him as the intense current swept through his heart, disrupting its rhythm and threatening to stop it forever. The terrible energy sent his body into a violent spasm, sending him crashing into the wall behind him. The smell of burning skin filled his nostrils, part of his fingers scorched by the heat from the wire. In a tiny moment of survival instinct, Wade jerked his arm back. The force of the current made him feel as if he was being sucked into the transformer. With one last effort, His finger left the hole, and he fell backwards, hitting the cold concrete. His entire body shook, his muscles no longer working as he wanted. Wade gasped, his breathing ragged and painful. He tried to lift his arm to look at the injured finger. The tip of the finger was charred black, the skin peeling off, and pain spread throughout his arm. The room was still dark. The hum of the transformer seemed to grow louder, as if mocking his pain and helplessness. Wade tried to get up, but his legs wouldn't support him. "I have to get out. I have to get out now," he thought. But the voice in his head was shaking, filled with fear. He leaned against the wall behind him, feeling his way back to the entrance, where he had wedged his shoe to keep the door from closing. Each step was a great effort, with pain pounding in his arm and a shiver running through his body. There was only one thought in his mind. "I can't here." As the maintenance worker opened the door to the power cellar from across the hallway, the crack of the ground current drew him closer to the transformer area. The air in the room was stuffy and pungent, a strange combination of burning and decay. In the dim light, he moved toward the source of the sound and immediately saw the strange shape of a human body. Wade was still half standing, pinned between the transformer and the wall, his fingers still embedded in the hole in the device. His body had been partially burned by the current, revealing dry, dark skin. Bodily fluids had leaked out of his body over the past 2 months, helping to change the path of the current as it passed through his body and into the ground. When police were notified of the shoe being left outside, they checked the vault through another door, but did not enter further. From their limited view, they found nothing unusual and concluded that Wade was not in the room. This extended the time before his body was discovered, causing great harm to his family as they did not receive clear answers. The fact that the outer door leading to the vault was not locked, contrary to safety regulations, made Purdue largely responsible for Wade's death. Negligence in the management and maintenance of these important facilities was clearly demonstrated. Purdue agreed to pay $500,000 to Wade's family as part of the settlement. In addition, to honor Wade's memory and prevent similar cases from happening again, Purdue established a scholarship in his name. This scholarship is for students studying electrical engineering with the hope of raising awareness and improving safety in the industry. Wade's death is not only a heartbreaking story, but also a sobering reminder of negligence and the dire consequences it can have. It is a reminder that seemingly simple and often overlooked safety procedures can mean the difference between life and death.